Hello, everyone. Another book club with Women on the Move. And today is Thursday, April the 10th, and the year is 2025. We'll start with introductions. I'm Cindy.
I'm Angie.
I'm Melody.
I'm Odella.
I'm Sam.
I'm Vivian.
I'm Sadie.
Awesome. And we'll have another member joining us in a little bit. But in the meantime, I am going to turn it over to our host tonight, who is Odella, and she will share the title of the book, the author, give you a preview of the book, and she's going to lead us in our discussion this evening. So, Odella, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So the book we're discussing tonight is The House of Eve, and it's written by Sadeqa, I think that's how you say your name, Johnson. And the story takes place in the 1950s and the 1960s in Philadelphia. And the subject evolves around uh, women who have had children outside of marriage. Our primary character, or one of them, is 15-year-old Ruby Purcell, who is on track to become the first in her family to attend college. But she ends up having a taboo relationship or love affair that threatens to pull her back into poverty and desperation that she feels has been passed on to her like a birthright. The other important character is Eleanor Quells. She arrives in Washington, D.C. with ambitions and secrets. She meets William Pride at Howard University. William's family is one of the Washington, D.C.'s elite, wealthy Black families, and his parents just don't let anyone into their circle. Eleanor hopes that the birth of her baby will help her to feel more accepted and help her to find her life or the life that she deserves. But she soon realizes that that is much easier said than done. And the two ladies, their stories collide in the most unexpected ways. Both ladies make a decision that will shape their lives. So I have a series of questions that I'd like to have some feedback on from our ladies. Let's look at the quote that starts book one. And the quote basically says, "You live in a beautiful space like a bubble, and the world says I don't belong. But let nobody steal my joy, sweetness, and you live a miserable life." So what do you think, or how do you think this quote sets the tone for the opening session? And more importantly, what do you think are the monsters in the story, if any?
Odella, can you do me a favor? Can you repeat that quote one more time for me?
Yes. You live in a beautiful, safe bubble, and the world says, I don't belong. Can't let nobody steal my joy, sweetness, and I live a miserable life. Or I'll live a miserable life. Sorry. So what do you all think?
Mhm. I think that that quote is true if you believe it in yourself. You have to have a certain amount of self-assuredness about yourself. And I think because of the age, especially of the two main characters that kind of collide with each other, uh, they are just getting to know themselves. And especially for Ruby, her circumstances were very dire circumstances. Everybody there was no success in her family. She didn't see success, and it just went downhill from there. She didn't have a role model that was successful. So she didn't think that she had, I don't think she thought that she could get out of it, but she had determination and was determined to get out of it. And I think that was the biggest thing that helped her, was her determination.
Yeah, I think, we all come with in our, within our family, innocent and ready to grow. And it's the experiences and how people help you interpret them that make you either strong or not. Um, I I didn't know where that quote came from. I thought you were going to do the one by Toni Morrison at the very beginning where it says part one. Where is that quote from? Was it in the
Well,
book?
no, it wasn't exactly in the book. It
Oh,
was in the prelude. Yeah.
oh, it was in the prelude. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because the one from Toni Morrison is that, that each story has monsters in it who make them
Mhm.
tough instead of brave. And I thought, but that is just like that's true with life. You either become tough or you become brave, right? Through the things you go through.
So, given that particular quote by Toni Morrison, do you think that there were monsters in the story?
Yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
Oh,
definitely.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but one person's monster, they may not be a monster to themselves. I mean, I thought one thing this book did really well was gave you motivations. I mean, you understood where everyone was coming from and what they were trying to protect. I mean, they were all afraid of something, you know. It seemed like they were all working out of um some desire to have an outcome that they had already had thought through themselves. Even the ones who were monstrous, who did things that you're like, oh, that's so awful, you kind of knew what their motivations were. They all came from different directions.
Right,
Okay.
I'll
Ju-
say that the monster for Ruby was her mother's boyfriend. Now, he
Yeah.
didn't have
Okay.
any good intent. So
Mhm.
he was just scandalous, and all he was out for was himself. And then the mother,
Mhm.
unfortunately, she, walks in, she doesn't know the details. Her daughter doesn't want this, but it stemmed from the mother not being a person of integrity and leaving the bus fare for the daughter. So the daughter
Mhm.
feels like,
Mhm.
okay, he's offering some money. And then, of course, he wants something in return for this bus fare. And then the mother walks in and sees this exchange and kicks her out of the house. So he just was no good in my terms. But then the other people, who you were alluding to, Angie, the mothers of the boyfriend, the young man who liked Ruby,
Jimmy's yeah.
Shimmy's
Jimmy's
mother.
Shimi.
mom,
Jimmy's mother,
Shimmy.
Jimmy's
yeah.
mom, and then also William's mother. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
they had good intentions. What they were doing, their intentions were good, and I wouldn't call them monsters or evil, but at
Mhm.
the time for
Oh,
Ruby and for Shimmy, and then for Eleanor, it was extremely uncomfortable.
But
Mhm.
I also include Ruby's mother as a
Oh,
monster
yes. Oh,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
because she resented Ruby. She did not
Mhm.
want Ruby to be successful, and she basically blamed Ruby for messing up her life. So I consider her a monster too.
I agree. I think she kind of intentionally didn't leave the money
Uh-huh.
because, in a sense, she
Mhm.
was sabotaging her from moving forward. And the best thing she could have done was to, in a sense, kick her out and let her be with her aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Right.
That worked out very well for her.
It did. And it was just so sad because the grandmother, Grandma Nini, she
Mhm.
loved Ruby. So you
Yes.
Mhm.
hated the fact that, she lost her eyesight and she wasn't able to take care of her. But that made Ruby
You're gonna have
strong.
to sit still.
That made Ruby strong, what she had to go through. And I'm glad that the boyfriend with no morals, at least nothing came of it from a physical standpoint. You
Mhm.
know, he threatened it, but I'm glad nothing happened.
Yes, me too.
I also think the monsters were the nuns
Yeah,
at
I was
the
gonna
Yeah.
say I thought they were the
location.
nuts.
They were
Mhm.
mean
Hmm.
Yeah.
on there.
Yeah. I
And
didn't think
they,
they came off very well. One of them did, the young one
The
did.
young
He
one was
tried to
okay.
help them.
Right.
But you know, I think you end up seeing all the women almost as fulfilling what had been dealt to them in life, whether it be good or bad. There weren't, really the only male characters that were developed were Shimmy and
William.
William,
William.
but they were pretty hollow. I mean, you didn't get to
Correct.
know them real well. You got to know the women well. The men were not well developed at all, which is okay because it wasn't their story.
Right.
Right.
But they played important roles, and they played the role that you would have wanted them to play because they were both supportive, which
Correct.
was not. Yeah.
They were supportive, but you could also tell they were used to, in a sense, being controlled by their mother.
Mhm.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
in William's place, he started to see and realize and recognize towards the end, obviously, when things kind of came to light. But I think he also realized he needed to shed his parents in a better light than he had as well, and look at it from a different view, which was Eleanor's view. Look at how they're making her feel.
Exactly. And
Because
I
he
would
really had
have
no idea.
correct. And then Melody, I'm glad at least William did that. Shimmy, for me, was very naive. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
he was very nice, but he was so naive in terms of their differences. Here, you're white, she's black. This is taboo at this time. He knows enough to
Mhm.
sneak around, you know.
He was
Right.
So,
17 though.
yes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
still,
Yeah. Yeah.
Ruby knew, but it's like, come on, Shimmy, that was just naivety on his part.
Yeah.
But could it have also been that he was brought up in his family?
Yeah, I
They
was
were
gonna
thought of as minorities. So
Yes, but
he was naive, but he also thought, Jewish people at that time considered themselves, or they thought they were minorities. I never saw them in my growing up. I didn't see Jewish was their religion, not their race,
Mhm.
but he didn't see that.
yeah,
Okay.
but he came from a family where he had too many adult responsibilities with his
Mhm.
father and then not enough latitude because his mother
Mhm.
really controlled everything. So
Yes,
he seemed to be emotionally, you know, stunted, wanting to have what he wanted and just, without seeing implications of it.
Yeah,
correct.
he was naive.
Mhm.
Well, I have another question for you. The novel takes place before the Civil Rights Movement in the mid 50s and 1960s. Discuss how racism affects both women and their families, such as when Ruby goes stocking shopping with Aunt Marie, or how she is treated in the house of Magdalene. Would these incidents be surprising today? Why or why not?
I don't think that they would be surprising. When I go to look for hosiery now, um, here in Bakersfield, there's only one color I can buy, and that's either black or off black. There's no brown. So I don't see it, for me, I don't see it as surprising at all. And I think it still continues
It does.
to a lesser degree, but it still continues. And I think being here in California, I have always lived here. We're not aware of some of the hardships that other minorities had to go through.
We're still going through.
Still going
Yes,
through in the South. And then
exactly.
Bakersfield, I can say, is definitely more conservative in the
Mhm.
thinking and the understanding and the openness to all people because basically growing up as an adult in Southern California, LA is a melting pot.
Right.
It's like Bakersfield, people still, they can still stay in their little niches and think that's how the world revolves, but it's like that's your little niche, but there's a whole big world outside of your little section.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I
And
can
then
I
go-
can say that California is very different. I guess you would say they're more liberal in that, or
Yes.
a little bit more inclusive, accepting.
Yes.
Whereas when, like, my brother lives in Alabama, and we have a house there because so my parents can visit with him, and there's still a lot of unrest. So, and shockingly sometimes, because I have lived here in California, and I do have those privileges and stuff, and so it does take me back when I see the injustice.
Yes.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
but I do know that it's still here in Bakersfield. I saw it with my kids.
Oh, yeah.
And I mostly taught in poverty schools, and so if it's not Oaxacan, we we had both, everything. It was a melting pot where both the places where I was at.
Yeah.
And you can definitely see that there were biases.
So far, two themes that we've kind of discussed and not really given a name is the issue of a sense of belonging, because both girls wanted to belong, and then the issue of race. Now, one of the biggest shocks for Eleanor is the colorism among the Black people in Washington, D.C. And this is highlighted in particular when Eleanor meets William's family and describes it as being a room filled with white-faced Negroes.
Yep.
Right. Can you
Been
hear
there.
me?
I've seen that. Yes.
So how does colorism play in the novel for both Ruby and Eleanor?
How does what?
It plays quite a bit in the novel on there. Eleanor wasn't light enough to fit in with William's family on there. And of course, Ruby was brown skinned, so she couldn't go everywhere. She couldn't go to some of the stores and all that. So racism played a part in both of their families.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Eleanor tried to pledge, she wasn't allowed to
Right.
because of the color of her skin.
Right. She was too dark.
And then the person who was over that sorority wanted William because William was a hot commodity. I love the fact that William truly loved Eleanor. He was a man of integrity. I loved his love for her. And, because Eleanor came from a poor family, but her family worked hard so that she could go to school. And I just want to bring this up since I'm talking about it now. I love the fact that at college, her roommate Nadine saw where she was lacking.
Oh, yes.
She was a dear friend. She lent her clothes. Oh no, you can't wear that there. You have to do that's a friend. Really
That's
is.
right.
That was
She remained a friend throughout the whole book.
Surely did.
Mhm.
That was
Yes.
powerful.
Yes, I have to agree with you on that. Both Ruby and Eleanor fell in love with men who were off limits and essentially forbidden, right?
That's right.
Mhm.
Jimmy is Jewish and William is upper class. How did these conflicts affect their relationships and shape each woman's decision throughout the novel?
Well, I think for Shimmy, he learned he had to learn. Going away actually helped him to see a different world and to understand a little bit better the biases.
Mm-hmm.
And William, I think I still see him as evolving, because he wasn't perfect. I mean, you know, he discounted things for him that were in his sphere, were he just didn't even think about it.
Mhm.
And didn't step into her world, because let's just face it, men are a little bit different, and they're not as emotional, so they take things more at face value. And until he started to go through her head process and understand it, you know, he evolved in that way. I think, I don't know, did I answer that? I don't know that I answered that.
But you know, also William, in my opinion, was a little, I want to say, naive, because he felt like his mother could do no wrong, and he was going behind Eleanor's back to make deals with the mother,
Right.
for Eleanor, and not sharing that with Eleanor.
Correct.
You know, so he, in my opinion, was he completely discounted her feelings.
Yeah.
As though her feelings didn't matter. His mother knew everything, and that's who he depended on.
And I don't think William meant to diss Eleanor. He just was so used to being controlled and going to his mother for everything.
Mm-hmm.
That was the norm. I don't think he thought he was doing anything wrong.
Both ladies had things that they were either trying to hide or to work around, because they wanted to be something, they wanted to grow. And
Yes.
they were stifled by whatever it was in their life
Mhm.
that was holding the things that were holding them back. And they were both trying really hard to break out of what they thought was the things that bound them to something that was, they wanted to be more than.
Mhm.
You know, one thing I was happy about, though, even in spite of all of the things that were holding both of them down, they both got their education.
Yes, they
Yes,
did.
Both
yes.
were able to do that, and I was very happy about that.
I was. And I was happy that Ruby made the choice, because Shimmy's mom made a deal with her, you
Uh-huh.
know,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
and through the end of the book, it's like she honored her word to his mother, because
Mm-hmm.
she said, I will pay for your college tuition. So it wasn't the best way for it to occur, but it
No,
made it easier for her, even though it came
exactly.
out of something very hurtful. But I
Mm-hmm.
love the fact that she did honor her word to his mother, even when,
Mm-hmm.
years down the road, they came back into each other's lives briefly. But I love the fact that she was a woman of her word and she got her education.
Mhm.
Right.
That's true.
But also the mother, I mean, I was surprised that she honored it. I was fully
Yes.
expecting her not
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. You're right.
Yeah. I also liked that Ruby really put herself in her mother's place.
Mm-hmm.
And in this place, her mother wasn't the monster. Her mother was actually showed her that I don't want my daughter or son to ever feel like I felt. I don't want to ever, you know, be the cause of someone's, unsettling. And so
Mhm.
she took from her mom's pain, and, she, sacrificed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
So we were talking a little bit, alluding to the role of mother. So how do you think the actions of Rose, Eleanor's mother-in-law, and Mrs. Shapiro, Shinny's mother, affect Eleanor and Ruby and what happens to them?
Oh,
Well, Rose
definitely.
eventually
Go ahead.
came around,
Yeah.
and became a help to Ruby. But I mean, to Eleanor.
Eleanor.
But Shimmy's mother, she just did what she just honored what she said she was going to do, and
she
that's
was trying to get rid of a problem.
exactly.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. But then Rose came around when I love the fact that Eleanor, she's pregnant. She feels William's marrying her because she's pregnant. The mom, Rose, even though she was controlling, when she knew that, it's like, I'm planning a wedding. So at least she wasn't trying to dismiss
Mhm.
her. But then she lost the
Right.
baby
Yeah.
prior to. And I love the fact that Eleanor didn't keep it a secret. she shared he still wanted her regardless. I love that. And then she lost the second baby. And then Rose was instrumental in in orchestrating the nun to talk to Eleanor about adoption. And then I was like, oh, wow. At the end, when we learn whose baby they adopted, it's like, really? That was just profound.
Yes.
That was like full circle. That was beautiful.
So were you surprised that Eleanor's secret was that she had been pregnant before and lost the baby?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. That was a surprise for me.
Because up until that point, she had been really honest with life. And so that did surprise me that she had kept that.
And, well, but like she said, she was honest. I mean, the topic didn't come up, and you don't share everything. You don't go through and say, just so you know, I had this boyfriend and this boyfriend and this boyfriend.
Right.
It was her business. But I kind of thought though that Rose's change was more to keep William, because it dawned on her William was not going to give up Eleanor.
Right.
And
when she probably was Angie.
Yeah, when she lost the first baby, she wanted to annul their marriage. She's like, well, we can annul it.
Right.
And he was like, no, I love her.
Yeah, I love that he stood up for her.
Yes.
And didn't give in to his mother and all of this, and basically saying, I'll walk away from it all because I love her that much. So I really admired him for that.
You could tell that he was hurt by the situation, but he still stood by her, and I appreciated that.
I wondered if his father had a role in that. They didn't allude to it at all, and his father had such a small part in everything.
Exactly.
I kept thinking, that's got to, where's the doctor, Dad? I thought,
right.
He walked in the house and went and read the paper while stuff was going on. I'm like,
he just provided the beautiful lifestyle for his family to live in the lap of luxury.
I guess.
Yes. So here's another question. Consider the other young women and the nuns at the house of Magdalene. How does religion, both inside and outside of the house, use Christianity to bring shame to what happened to them?
Oh, wow.
And how does this stigma of shame and unwed affect the women?
Well, they
there was
really
no
browbeat those poor girls and used the Bible
scripture
against them, I think.
Yeah.
It was so cultural. I mean, and it's still cultural that we put that blame on the girl or on the woman, and I mean that hasn't changed a whole lot either. But I just kind of felt like, what did 1940s? That's exactly how it's going to be and how it's going to be handled. And I think about who would have been nuns back in the 40s, and a lot of them were the oldest girl in the family who was sent to the convent. And so a lot of them didn't really have a calling. They were just like
the sent.
There was not really like unfortunately, I think within the culture we allow that to go on.
And the fact that it was a money making venture rather than what they thought it was to help the young ladies.
Yeah, I don't think they made a lot of money, but I don't think anybody ever helped them.
The young ladies thought they were being sent there to help them, not to take their babies to send out for adoption and make money off of it.
Right.
So that was disconcerting. And the fact that they lumped all of the girls in one group. Some girls was there because they were abused. That's how they got pregnant. They were raped. But they all got the same harsh treatments. You're nothing, you're sinners, you're this, you're that, and use the scripture to literally beat them down when they were already at their lowest point. The fact that they had to be at this home.
Exactly.
I would have liked for them to tell me more about the young lady that had the baby and got out
and escaped
and kept her baby.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have known more about her and the girl that escaped
and
with
helped
her.
Mm-hmm.
for the baby that was born that had a bowed leg and was going to go to an orphanage. I just think it just kind of was God-smacking that this, they didn't help anybody there.
Wasn't a perfect baby, so it was expendable.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the things for me, you would have thought because they were supposedly religious and they had the Bible, that their teachings would be a little different. Forgiveness, compassion, and it just depended. Sometimes they were not very compassionate at all, and they definitely weren't forgiving.
You would have hoped that
Totally
they
the
would have
opposite.
exactly. You would have hoped that they would have shown more love and more grace. But Angie, you said something, the oldest daughter, when you think about it from that standpoint, which is true, a lot of them they were sent there. They didn't have a calling. So it was something they were made to do. They didn't want to. Look at how they felt. Their younger sisters are already married. There's a lot of anger that they had. And then it's like, I have this holier than thou attitude, and I'm going to use the Bible because look at what you did, and you're a sinner versus looking, if you live in a glass house.
Mother Margaret sure did sound angry.
He did.
Mother Margaret was angry with everyone.
One thing that I thought was very interesting too was one thing that Ruby's her baby's mother, and then Eleanor's mother-in-law, it alluded to they paid a lot. Well, not Eleanor's mother-in-law, Eleanor's husband. It alluded to that they paid a lot of money for these babies.
Yes.
Yes.
Also, if you think about it, it said it more so about the Black girls, or it might have been the whole thing, is that some of them were allowed to come there because they knew they were going to sell the babies, but they looked for the best and brightest young girls.
It sounded though they were
to
looking
adopt
for
the children out to.
Yes.
They selected rich families to give
Yes.
That was on their part. I don't think they cared about the status of the girl.
No, I think that was a scam.
Baby was, if that was a perfect baby, they were going to give it to a rich couple.
But there was one part in the book where it talked about they looked at some of the girls' background, and Ruby was really smart, and Eleanor wasn't a part of that. But some of the other girls, they said that they were very smart. They did well in school.
I also think the nun said that because that's, that it for her, it was lining her pockets. It wasn't helping the institution at all. It was the nun. She truly was, she was making the money. And so she would have told unsuspecting people anything that they had wanted to hear.
I agree.
And I just think it happened to be that Ruby was very smart and, that situation. So
they could get more money for the baby.
Nuns, for the nuns, it was all about the money.
Right.
The whole thing that they were interested in. How much money they
free labor from the girls.
Free labor.
Exactly. Free labor. Right.
And then if you look at it, William and Eleanor, they had the means to adopt this child because they had the money.
That's true.
It didn't say it, but it kind of nuns. There were to read the nuns.
You're cutting in and out, Sam.
Yeah, you don't have a good connection right now, Sam. You were frozen. Can you repeat that?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. I was just saying that the nuns, the money was going to the church, and the priest and the church were controlling the money. It just kind of alluded to that. So the nuns really, they were in a bad situation also. They were caught up.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I don't think the nuns made any money. I think the money went to give them food and stuff like that, but nobody else was helping them. And then whatever left over went to the church, and there was nothing. I mean, nobody was going on vacation. I don't think.
Right.
No,
right.
I don't.
Mother Margaret was. I think she was just a bitter lady because this was what her life was now.
I agree with that, but I think there was, I don't know, I was reading more into it. I have too much to say for how religion played a role in that, and it wasn't the religion that I know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of where the historical part comes in, because there truly were, in a sense, these what do they call them, women's homes for there were, and most of the time, with some of these things, even with monasteries and hermitages and different things, there's not always a priest that's overseeing them.
Right.
They may come to, be a part of it, but it didn't sound like it was attached to a church. It sounded really like it was truly, in a sense, if you want to look at it, it was a charity for unwed mothers. And so it looks like it's good on the outside, and in theory, it sounds like it was a wonderful thing. But this was also during that time. I don't know if you guys have read that book, When, Before I Was Yours. And it was a lot of kids who were actually being taken from poor parents in some of the swampy areas.
Right.
They were put into homes so that they could go on to wealthier families again too. And it was a type of money-making status type thing. And I don't know that the nuns necessarily were trying to get status that way, but that was their charity. And the more money they got for a child, I think the more money went back to really specifically the nuns, because you didn't see the girls get any really privilege.
Right.
Even I mean, even the white girls,
Right.
they didn't talk a whole lot about them, but it didn't sound like they were really treated much.
So they still had chores and stuff they had to
Correct.
do, and they didn't get a whole lot either,
And even after they had the baby, it was something about if they hadn't paid off something, they had to
Yeah.
They had to stay at work.
Yes.
They had to
Right.
stay and work
Yeah.
until
Work it
that whatever fee
It
was paid
it was
off.
like they were sold into indentured servitude.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And I think also their behavior played into that too. If the nun liked you, then she kind of started to let you off to a certain extent. But if you pushed her buttons and went against what she said, I think she also retaliated. Just unfortunate that people do that.
Correct.
Okay, let's look at question number 13. In the end, Ruby notes that Mother Magdalene was right. Oh, Mother Margaret was right. The only way forward was to forget. Do you think that this could be said not only of Ruby, but of this forgotten history of unwed homes for mothers? What's the harm of forgetting?
Repeating the ills. So you can't forget this. Learn from the mistakes, learn from the challenges, the issues, so you can make the future better.
I've got a question. Now that they're rolling back abortions and stuff, are we going to see these homes again?
I bet you are. I bet you are. Yeah.
Kind of scary.
It is.
It is.
Yes.
I think that the idea of forgetting being the answer to solving your problems is the Band-Aid, because it's keeping secrets, and those that only fester. It seems like every book we read, there's somebody's got a secret somewhere, and it only makes everything worse. It only makes everything worse. So that's an easy patch to say we're just going to forget it, move on. But once you've lived something, it's part of you.
Most definitely.
And it's part of your story. I mean, and I think it's important that our stories be told. And, I have a lot of respect for Ruby, because she did the hard thing. She did she did like the baby. I mean, how can you not?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's so, it had to have been so difficult. And you know, she sacrificed, and that's, I think that's what hurts me sometimes, is I hear, you know, girls or women who have given up their babies, only to find out that their kids did not have the better life that they had expected. And in this case, her child was going to have a better life.
Yeah.
But you know, it still is important to know the story. And I mean, I've had so many friends who have been adopted who just wanted to know why, you know, and not necessarily to make anybody feel bad, but to know what their story was.
Right.
And to understand and to try to put themselves in those shoes. And
do you think that's why Ruby went back to Howard? Because she knew that the people who adopted him was a doctor there. It was a doctor's family, and
did she know who
she
adopted
didn't know
them?
that.
No,
She didn't
I
know.
don't think so.
She was it was there in Washington, D.C., and she had overheard that it was going to be a doctor's family adopting Loretta's baby, or the one whose foot was wrong.
Right.
And she knew that that's who ended up. I just wondered if she was kind of looking herself, not necessarily to take back, but just to check up, you know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think Ruby became an ophthalmologist because of her
Right.
grandmother.
Yes.
Yeah.
But she ended up back in DC.
Yes.
which made sense that she would have gone to Howard for that.
Yes.
I think.
Because
They were
historically
very
at that
racist.
time,
It was one of the good
to be that type
powerful.
of doctor, you had to go to a HBCU almost.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Howard had
they were
Howard or
medical.
Meharry.
a
They
good
were
medical
medical,
school.
yeah. It was a medical school.
A lot of African Americans went to Howard for medical school. That one in the school in Georgia.
Yes.
Meharry, I think.
Meharry is in Tennessee.
Georgia.
Is it
Tennessee?
Is it in
I
Georgia?
don't know.
It's in Georgia.
Oh no, it's the other
It's in
one
Georgia.
that's in Tennessee.
So
Vanderbilt.
let's discuss that last chapter a little bit more closely. This is the only time that the two women kind of meet. How did that make you feel? And if the book continued, what would you want the women to connect over what happened, or remain just simple acquaintances?
I would like Ruby to get to see her daughter, and you know, whether she acknowledged that she's her mother or not. I would just like for her to get to see her daughter as I think she was a teenager by then. That would have been really good for me. And I don't know whether they should let each other know who they were, you know.
Right.
I'm hoping that another book come out, because remember when the daughter was trying to say, I don't look like my parents. Where does hair come from? I said, okay, so maybe another book's gonna come out where she get to figure it all out.
I was thinking the same thing. I was hoping that another book comes out.
I would like for Shimmy to come back and meet his daughter.
Jimmy.
I was wondering if Ruby would recognize her, because she said that, you know, he had his nose and she was picking out the things when she was first born, and the age would have been just right too. You know,
that's why I wanted her to see her. You know,
I thought it was a beautiful way to end the book. You know, it took full circle of the pain, and then it showed joy and hope, and it showed restitution and healing from so many different aspects and accomplishment.
And we can all wish how it ends.
Yes.
So it's an excellent book.
Well, so one last question. We, you know, in our other sessions, we would always ask, who's our favorite character? So can you pick?
Aunt Marie for me. Aunt Marie.
Yeah.
Who was yours, Linda?
Aunt Marie.
Oh yeah,
Aunt Marie. She was
but
sweet.
I just fell in love with Ruby. I couldn't.
Yeah,
yeah.
Ruby
Me too.
showed so much strength for a young girl. for
Yes.
Me
15 year
too.
old. And so much she had dealt with so much in her life, and she was trying to make the best of it, and she was in charge of herself. I just thought
Yes.
that she was
Mhm.
there's a lot
I
there.
agree with Linda though. Aunt Marie, she accepted everybody and she gave them hope. She gave her hope. You're going to be
Mhm.
our first one.
Right. Right.
You're not going to
No
be
matter what.
poor. You no
Mhm.
matter what, you're going to make it,
You're gonna be
Didn't
it.
stop believing in her.
I said, I wrote in my note to you guys because I thought I was going to get onto this meeting. I said, to me, she represents that foundation and support person we all need in our life who will love us and help us no matter how
No
messy
matter
our
what.
lives get,
Mm-hmm.
and give us a big dose of truth, even though it hurts, and
Yes,
be
really.
there to help us start over again and
That's right.
again.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And that was
No,
Absolutely.
Marie.
Eleanor's
When she
mother did
left,
that too.
when Ruby left that unwed mother's home, she went back to Marie. She didn't go to
Right.
Inez or
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
she went back to Marie, and Marie helped push her to achieve her dreams.
Mhm.
Exactly.
But
And
I agree. Eleanor's mother did the same thing.
Mother.
And I
Yeah.
appreciated
Eleanor's mother.
her for saying, you gotta speak the truth.
Yes.
Mhm.
You gotta
Mm-hmm.
Right.
you gotta own up to
Mm-hmm.
this. This is you.
Right.
Mhm.
Well,
that was good. I love the
Both
fact
mothers.
when Marie saw what was going on with Shimmy and Ruby. You know, as an adult, you see those things. I love the fact that she
mm-hmm.
was still loving with her. You know, she was firm and just,
Mm-hmm.
but still loving and accepting even when it did go too far. And, now we have
Mhm.
Yeah.
something that, of course, she didn't want her to turn up pregnant, but she dealt with her with love and grace.
That's true.
One thing I really liked about Marie was she kept it real. She
Mhm.
didn't
Yeah.
sugarcoat
She
it.
didn't sugarcoat.
She said what needed to be said.
Mhm.
And so many of us can think of somebody, our mothers or somebody in our lives that was like that just kept it real with us to say, look, like that old war song, you slipping in the darkness, don't do it. Sometimes we listened, sometimes we didn't, but they loved us enough to say it.
Right.
So I just looked up whether there would be a sequel. It says there will not be a full sequel, but I have written a short story on Amazon called Fallen Grace. It's a part of the Blaze collection that continues the story of Bubbles, Ruby's sweet mate from the attic. I hope you will enjoy it.
Oh, good. Thank
Nice.
you.
Okay.
So,
And
anyways,
what was the name of it again?
it was called Fallen Grace, and
Okay.
it looks like it's a short story on Amazon. So
We can find out what happened to the
Yes.
one that got away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what I said. I wanted to know
That
what.
would be interesting too.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. So, ladies, those are my questions. I enjoyed the book as well. And I was hoping that there would be a sequel, but I knew that there wasn't going to be one, but I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Hope you
Awesome.
did too.
We
That's great.
did.
Thank
It
you.
was a great
We
book.
did.
Very good selection. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you for your closing words, Odella. We thoroughly love The House of Eve by Sadeqa Johnson, and 2 thumbs up from everybody. So thanks for a fabulous book club.
Mhm.